Owen Fairclough, our business editor here. UBS paying the price for a disastrous end of 2011.
We knew it was going to be this way, Stuart. They had a pretty rotten, as you say, fourth quarter, and so it's proved. The headline figure for UBS's results out this Tuesday morning. Net profit down by some 76%. At least they did turn a profit, but only around 390 million Swiss francs or so. Remember, those fourth quarter earnings fell right at the time when UBS was suffering from the fallout of that trader scandal. Kweke Adebolo, London-based trader, losing the company some $2 billion with trades on exchange-traded funds and so on. Also led to the resignation, remember, of Oswald Gruber, the CEO of UBS, who took the brunt of responsibility for those losses racked up. So it was priced in. We knew that UBS was going to have a difficult fourth quarter. The bank also saying it foresees, in its words, headwinds for growth and gains in early 2012, due to, guess what? Yes, that ongoing Eurozone crisis.
Yeah. Heard of that one. And the Asian markets, they're in the doldrums. So much uncertainty, rather, hanging over Greece, of course.
Yeah, of course, we're seeing some numbers. We're seeing the Greek government or coalition trying to get itself together to present the EU and the IMF some sort of plan to get that second bailout. But still, the market's fretting about exactly where it's going with the clock ticking on default. You can see there the Nikkei ending the day around 1% down there. The Shanghai Composite around 2% down as things stand. Just the Kospi managing to find a few gains this Tuesday.
So the Greek government appears to be inching its way towards securing that second bailout, do we think?
Yeah, the latest German-led plan now is to effectively ring-fence some of the money that Greece might get under that second bailout to make sure that Greece can pay off private creditors, private investors who hold around 60 to 80 billion euros worth of debt for Greece. So under that plan, Greece may avoid a default in a few weeks' time and may well get that second 130 billion euro bailout. But Greece is also setting itself up for a fall in another way. By almost any measure, this country simply isn't reforming itself quickly enough. Katerina Vitozzi explains.
Tough reforms that are proving hard to implement. Greece has struggled to impose agreed austerity measures. But what are these targets and how far does Greece have to go to meet them? What's happened to Greek privatisation? The target to sell off 50 billion euros of state assets by 2015 has been reduced. The new target, 35 billion by 2013. But at the moment, only 1 billion euros worth have been successfully privatised. Is there any sight of public sector reforms? Greece promised to lose 150,000 civil service jobs by the end of 2015. But they've struggled to cut even a tenth of that by the end of this year, and ministers have to vote through a change in the law to allow these dismissals to happen. And what about the fight against tax fraud? Despite a high-profile public name and shame campaign, Greece has clawed back just 10% of the money it wants from unpaid tax bills, in a country where up to a quarter of GDP is from undeclared revenues. Has Greece cracked its unions? The government wants to make its labour markets more flexible and competitive. But industries like lorry drivers, pharmacists and lawyers are all protected by strong unions. In the face of nationwide strikes, the government's not yet tackled them. Leaders have agreed to cut spending for this year by about 3.3 billion euros. It'll be a much-needed crop. Greece's 2011 budget deficit was way over its forecast, coming in at 9.6%.
I thought we're going to stay in the Eurozone now. Owen's got some new figures that show just how much of a slog President Sarkozy has to make France a little bit more like Germany.
Well, some say it's a difficult sell for the French president to try and suggest that the French should become a little bit more like the Germans in terms of their efficiency, their productivity, and even tougher sell when France records its biggest ever trade deficit, as it has done. New figures from the government show that in 2011, the French trade deficit hit 70 billion euros. We saw imports rising by 11%, but exports rising only 8.5%, leaving that big difference. In fact, over the last 20 years or so, the French share of global trade has halved to around 3.5%. Perhaps more stinging for the French as well is that countries like Italy, which have barely recorded any growth over the last decade or so, are actually exporting more than France right now. And of course, Germany remains the exporter to beat, of course, with massive trade surpluses. The UK as well, even Spain exporting more than France right now.
So a dwindling share of the global trade pie, but some sectors turning a surplus, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds bad, and it is obviously overall, and yet France does quite well in sectors like agriculture and aeronautics as well. In fact, Airbus helped drive a healthy €17.5 billion surplus off the back of Airbus racking up record orders through 2011, beating the likes of Boeing and so on. Also agriculture as well, that sector with a decent surplus of around €11.5 billion. But overall, the picture remains that French exports are down. That trade balance is going to need some work to try and redress in future.
Let's have a look at a few more of the day's business headlines then. Mitsubishi says it's willing to sell its Dutch factory for just €1 if the buyer pledges to keep the 1,500 staff in place. The Japanese car maker has announced it's pulling out of Europe altogether to concentrate on emerging markets like Thailand. The decision to close the plant run by Nedcar has stunned Dutch unions who say it will be catastrophic for the local economy.
British shops have suffered their second weakest January sales since records began. The British Retail Consortium said total sales grew just over 2%. That's half the overall annual figure. The organisation says inflation running at 4% is also stripping out many of the gains made by retailers.
And it's emerged that a Cypriot shipping company is paying commodities giant Glencore to use one of its container vessels because demand has slumped so badly. Global Maritime Investments is waiving its daily $2,000 fuel bill to transport grain from Japan to Europe. Maritime freight costs have been driven down around 20% by reduced global demand. Now, we're just going to mention one other thing that's coming into us here at France 24. We're hearing that mutinying Maldives police have taken over the state broadcaster, that's MNBC, and they're now broadcasting opposition-linked television. This is just coming into us from Reuters news agency in the Maldives. We're also hearing information from the Maldives president that he is safe in military headquarters in control of the army. That coming in from the presidency in the Maldives. We will, of course, bring you more on that as we get it here on France 24. And Owen, you've got a guest coming up in your next bulletin in just over an hour's time.
Yeah, indeed. We'll be talking a little bit more about those UBS results with our correspondent Victoria Morgan, just to get the inside track really on the outlook for that bank. Remember, if you're just joining us, UBS's fourth quarter profits down 76% in the wake of that trader scandal that rocked the bank at the tail end of last year.
That's coming up here on France 24. Before all that, though, Lorna's here with the latest headlines after the break.